Hello there. Today I'm lucky enough to be trying a wine from the Kumeu River Winery, so a winery in New Zealand in the Auckland region. And this is their Cremant Blanc de Blanc. It's a non-vintage wine. So Kumeu is about 25 kilometres to the northwest of the city centre in Auckland. The winery Kumeu River is owned and run by the Brajkovich family. Very much their story is one that's quite typical of the early development of New Zealand's wineries, in that they were settlers who'd come here from Croatia. Initially, Michael Brajkovich came across. He was working in Northland's gum fields, and having established himself here, brought his wife, Kate, and son, Matty, across to live here as well. And after several years working as gum diggers, really arduous work, extracting gum from buried prehistoric kauri trees in the swamps of Northland, they'd raised enough money and they were able to buy a plot of land in Kumeu. At that stage, Kumeu would have been a fair way outside Auckland, a sparsely populated region with plenty of market gardens and agricultural interests, supplying fruit and vegetables to the growing city. They purchased the land in 1944, and after Mick's unfortunate death, Matty and his mother developed what was known as at that stage as the San Marino Winery. However, it wasn't until the 1980s, when they renamed the winery Kumeu River, that Matty changed the direction of the winery. Not satisfied with producing wines from hybrid grape varieties and fortified wines, he chose to plant noble vinifera grape varieties such as Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. As I say, the winery became Kumeu River in 1986, and since then Matty's family have established the winery as one of the premium producers of Chardonnay in New Zealand and arguably in the world. So for that reason I thought it would be really interesting to look at their Blanc de Blanc Cremant, so a sparkling Chardonnay. The wine is non-vintage, but I understand the base wine is predominantly from the 2017 vintage. The vintage was cool and windy, although there was a burst of rain on the 16th of February. For the large part, most of the rainfall that came around harvest time came after the sparkling wine had been picked. Picking for sparkling wine fruit started on the 21st of February, a full week before they started picking fruit for table wines. Everything was hand-picked and I presume fermented in tank. The winery conducts all its alcoholic fermentations with indigenous yeasts, so I would assume the same is the case for the sparkling wine. The wine is made up 100% of Chardonnay grapes grown in the Kumeu area. However, it is still a wine that's blended. There may be different fermentations of the Chardonnay, but what they practice at Kumeu River is to have what you'd call a perpetual reserve, whereby they have some large seasoned French oak barrels from which they draw off and top up a proportion of reserve wine every year to give some additional complexity, richness and body to the wine. So this is almost a sort of a Solera of older Chardonnay with sort of greater richness and nuttiness that will add an extra dimension to the blended wine. Following blending, the wine was bottled with yeast and sugar to instigate the second fermentation, and that took place in May 2018. That's clearly marked on the back label. Now the wine aged on its lees, they say for 36 months, although I note that degorgement took place 40 to 41 months after bottling, depending on when in May they actually bottled it. So I would assume that by that stage it had been riddled and was being stored with the yeast at the bottom of the bottle à point. Riddling went on entirely by hand. They have some classic old pupitre, and I don't actually know if this would have been hand degorged or whether they actually had a degorger by that stage. I believe they purchased one now, but I'm not sure whether by 2021 that had arrived or not. At degorgement, a dosage of 6 grams per litre was added to the wine. So this is a brew wine. So I'm looking for a wine that has the finesse and elegance of a Blanc de Blanc. I'm looking for really fine bead as a result of that long yeast aging and the autolysis that will have gone on as the yeast break down to sort of fix tiny bubbles in the wine. And I'm looking at a degree of richness and complexity resulting from that long yeast age and from the use of reserve wines. So let's see what we make of it, shall we? First of all, there's a medium yellow colour. It has a lovely golden tint. There is a fine bead of bubbles that rises continually even when I agitate it. That doesn't stop a continuous stream from coming. It's not dissipating that easily. On the nose, there are some lovely aromas of initially sort of dairy aromas, creamy aromas, yogurty notes. There's a beautiful yeastiness almost like fresh brioche, but underlying that there's some lovely fresh fruit. It's citric, it's fresh green apples with a lovely purity. So let's have a taste. On the palate there is a lovely mousse. It's fantastic softness, the whole thing. These fine bubbles giving a generous richness to the palate. And as they fade, there's a richness to the fruit. It's not necessarily ripe Chardonnay flavours, but there are sort of appley notes that are blended really nicely with some creamy hints from the yeast aging. And the whole thing is just giving a lovely roundness to the mid palate. There's almost a sort of a slight cut of sharp apple at the back palate as the acidity comes through there. This wine has really lovely acidity. It's mouth-watering. I can feel myself salivating, and yet at the same time the wine doesn't seem particularly tart because there's enough richness in the fruit to stop that from just standing out. And then somehow there's a minerality at the end of the fruit. As the fruit sort of starts to subside a little on the palate, you've got this almost sort of slightly saline note, very clean, almost steely note to the acidity. And the finish is long, clean, and the citric character to it as well, which is really quite helping its definition. The flavours are lasting exceptionally well. I've been talking away here, and I still have a good intensity of those lovely creamy, yeasty notes on the mid palate, while the fruit aromas have been sort of changing from their rich roundness and showing that more citric, nervous tension of the acidity to the end now. The bubbles are still rising persistently, as you'd expect from a wine with 36 months lees age. I think this is a really impressive fizz. I like the quality of the bubbles. I have tried Cremants from Kumeu over the last few years, and I think this is really showing a step up in terms of the persistence and the elegance of the bead, and in terms of the complexity of the wine. I mean, clearly it takes a while to develop a perpetual reserve such as they're using to add that additional complexity to the wine, and that's starting to show through as well. So yes, not a wine made in large amounts, not a wine I've seen reviews from the critics. I would expect this to score somewhere in the region of a 94, 95 out of 100. I think it's showing really nicely. I think it's a wine you could pop in the cellar for 4 or 5 years and it would gain in richness and complexity. But I would be totally confident that with its acidity and the lovely mousse it's got, that there wouldn't be any diminution of quality in that time. So yes, a wine produced in tiny amounts, but well worth seeking out if you get the chance. So thank you so much for joining us. I do hope you found this tasting of interest. If you've enjoyed it, do please press the like button. If you would like to watch more of our videos, it would be fantastic if you'd consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. And that way set yourself an alert and you can be notified every time we publish a new video. If you have any comments to leave, please pop those in the comments box below. We'd be interested to hear your views about the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else related to that. If you have any friends you think might like to watch the video, please do pass it on to them. We'd be very grateful to you for that. But most importantly, please try and find some time and come and join us for another tasting in the very near future, won't you? Bye till then.